Hello, welcome to another episode of BM by BM with Melinda Bailey and
Andrew Maxey.
Yes. So we never really introduced like how we know each other from episode 1, and we're 2 episodes in, so why not go ahead and start with that. The first district I ever taught in, actually one of the first schools I taught in, you had taught there, but you weren't there. And so I always heard talk of Andrew Maxey.
Oh, I'm so sorry. What a terrible beginning to a career.
No, it was great because everybody was like, oh, Andrew Maxey. And then eventually I became a technology instructor, and you had been a principal, I guess, for a while at that point. And I remember you had that leather book bag, like satchel.
Do you still have it? So the leather satchel was retired last year. It's retired to an undisclosed location downstairs.
Of course.
But you recall anything about the satchel, or do I go too far?
It was quite weathered and worn.
Camel skin satchel.
Oh, right.
And I think it was you who hypothesized that at that time I had probably gotten more use out of it than the camel had. So it held up really well. And so that satchel's replacement is goat leather. Oh. Jury's out on how well that replacement is going. It has way more pockets. I've lost my keys just like exponentially fewer times in the bag. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I didn't really know you until you were principal, and I was an instructional technology coordinator, but you just had great ideas. And one of the things I remember is that you were talking, I don't think you were talking directly to the superintendent, but you were like, I know my school and I think we can get the results that you're wanting, but I want to do it in a different way. Is that okay? And I don't know. You taught me strategery.
Thank you. Yeah, our school was the first school in the district to go to some form of BYOD at a time when our district's policy explicitly prohibited students from bringing devices on campus. So we got essentially a waiver. And for me, that honestly started a journey that I'm still on today, which has come in very timely right now. That journey of understanding what role technology has in the purposeful, meaningful, deep learning for students. And by the way, this last week, since Alabama schools have announced they will remain shut down, I've been talking about all of this as digital, online, and virtual learning, that there's an intersectionality there with them that is different than face-to-face. Anyway, that's not what the show's about, but I'll say that was a time in my professional life where I was doing my best to be a learner, to understand what place does Twitter have in schools. You will vouch for me, Mrs. Bailey, when I make the claim that it was I who created the hashtag TCS Learns, which is shortly to be retired, but has persevered for many a year and served us well. I will observe a moment of silence, but only because it's polite to let the other person talk.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So I was thinking the other day, it's been
your pastime.
8 years since I was a tech coach. Like, I mean, we haven't, had episodes of BM by BM for 8 years, but there we go.
Right.
So
love it.
Talking about technology is a good segue into this week's episode. So we were talking about Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Ooh. And of course, what does Fahrenheit 451 mean? What does that stand for?
It is the temperature at which a book will burn.
Yes. So this week's story, it features, well, a story. It's a book. Guy Montag, is a firefighter.
Montaigu. Go ahead. Sorry.
Montaigu.
Well, you're the French teacher. How should we say it?
Well, see, I thought his name reminded me of this guy in the Renaissance who made essays popular. But his name was Montaigne, like mountain, but it has an I.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if, I think a lot of the names have symbolism in the story. But so we have Guy, who's a firefighter. His captain of the fire brigade that he's on is Beatty, like Warren Beatty, but he's not Warren Beatty. Guy is married to Mildred, who he also calls Millie, and his next door neighbor is Clarice, who reminded me a lot of Luna Lovegood, and I love her.
Clarice. Go
on. But yeah, so those are the main characters. There's also Professor Faber, who is an old professor, reminds me of a Hogwarts professor. So those are a cast of characters. So what are some of your takeaways from the book?
So we haven't said out loud yet some of the very basic plot lines and facts about this story. So let's just lay it on you real quick there. In the book, this is a future in American society where books are outlawed. Books, not that you guys out there don't know what books are, but where books are outlawed. And Melinda Mrs. Bailey very correctly pointed out that the protagonist is a fireman. Firemen don't put out fires, they start fires. They find and burn books. And in fact, there is a little bit of more burning that goes on. We won't necessarily be super careful about what we burn when we're burning the offensive item that we find, or the book in particular. So there are several things here, but the important piece is one of the important pieces. The protagonist eventually starts to become somewhat curious, or like, why exactly is this that we must burn every book no matter what? And so he begins to feel the allure of the written word, as it were. And so anyway, the story is about his journey with that, and his struggle with being an enforcer of I was going to say extreme censorship, but that's probably not too harsh a way to describe it. But he's the instrument of that policy when he himself is not sure why, and begins to doubt the validity of the policy itself.
Right. And it seems like one of the two main themes to me that stuck out was the knowledge that is lost when it's made smaller and more concise. At one point, Beatty, his captain, is talking to him about the way that it used to be with firefighters, and it was saying that like Benjamin Franklin was one of the first firefighters in burning books, and like all of this stuff. Later on in the book, he paraphrases a lot of great literature, but he uses other words instead of what was actually written. And it's just really interesting. Like there's another instance when Guy goes to talk to Professor Faber, and he has a Bible, and he shows him the Bible, and Faber talks about how like the scripture that they have in front of them is not the same Jesus that is broadcast in between commercials. Because anyway, before I get started on the next thing, it's just very telling of how information can be dulled down to such a point that it really almost doesn't matter anymore. It's made so concise. Like a lot of the television programming that they have, it's like a 5-minute soap opera. So besides the dulling down of information so that it loses its idea completely, the other thing that stuck out to me was just technology and the endless speaking and, again, dulling to the people in the city. It never says what city they're in, but they're in the United States. But Montag's wife, Mildred, she loves her stories. She calls the screens in their living room her family. Like for soap operas, these women are part of her. And there's a plugin that they bought where she can be added into the script. So she has lines that she's supposed to say. And then also there's another plugin they paid for where she will the ads will be specifically directed to her.
Right.
Say Mrs. Montag.
Right.
Just like buy this dentifrice. They say that instead of toothpaste. But it's just so many ads, so much information. Another thing is he talks about these seashells that she goes to bed with in her ears. So basically she is always taking in information, which was convicting to me because right now I read Twitter or I refresh my Google feed on my phone to find out more about the COVID. So it's just, I think Bradbury, I don't know if he knew what we would have access to in this day and age, but there is so much information that you get to take in. I think one of the other things that comes out and is similar to the other two themes that I've talked about, being able to sieve that information, to filter it, to make sense of it, to know what's right and wrong, and to also form independent thought. There's one point in the book where Faber gives Guy an earpiece so he can talk to him and kind of help him through figuring stuff out. And so he gets to hear his captain's voice of what he thinks and what his ideas are. And Faber makes a very, not Faber, but Guy asks at one point, he's like, how am I supposed to know who's right? And Faber says, I'm going to tell you my side. You've heard Beatty's side and you can make your decision. So I think circling back to learning as we always do, Beatty says in the book as well, he talks about how learning has been dumbed down. Like there aren't arts and humanities. They're really just, it sounds like everybody's just a kung fu fighter. I forget what he says, but it's like just all action and moving around, but not a lot of thinkers, not a lot of tinkerers, not a lot of engineers. It sounds like they're just doing stuff. And there's this war. They never really say what the war is, who they're fighting, who's dying, stuff like that. I'm trying to keep my head in the middle. I keep moving it around. But so it's just like utter possible death at any given moment. And I think Guy's the only one who's really aware of that. And everyone else has just dulled themselves down. Like there's even another point where Mildred has two friends over and they're talking about how like one of them's been married 3 times and didn't have any kids. And then the other one's like, I had C-sections, so I didn't have to go through birth. And it's very interesting how detached from reality they are. And all they do is watch TV all day, which again, is hard not to do right now.
Yeah. But I think I see a connection to really both of the books we've already discussed and to a lot of other things that we have on our list. The one connection that I have made and that you touched on one of these points here just a minute ago is that if the books don't exist, then you can revise history. That's what's happening with, Benjamin Franklin was one of our heroes. Why? Because he did like we're doing. And then the other piece about information is constantly fed to you, or entertainment is
Mm-hmm.
constantly fed to you. And I think the critical point about this is not only are there not uh, um, stories that are written, but even their shows, their stories are very shallow, are very brief. They're like
Mm-hmm.
bite-sized vignettes. And
Mm-hmm.
a criticism I have of film and television is it tells you everything. It just shows you, rather than, it's very hard to develop characters. And to that's the beauty of literature a lot of time, is that it delves into human nature and the questions we wrestle with without telling the answer or an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to do. And I have to credit the folks who make movies and shows, and we're featuring movies here, but it's harder to do that when you only have an hour than when you have 100 or 200, or in Tolkien's case, several thousand pages to work with. But that's the problem with that is, and I made this little connection in my mind. These societies that we see in the books that we've talked about so far, books and movies, have a real problem because they don't have a mechanism to check their own uh, wrong assumptions. It
Mm-hmm.
almost, when you were speaking a minute ago, it's almost like the problem with cults. And the problem is, so my parents are missionaries, and they're involved in training pastors and training in Bible, really understanding and studying to preach. The problem with a lot of religious cults are people have an idea and don't study, don't get feedback, don't get someone. My experience has been, how many times do you say, wow, that's a good idea, and you have something and someone comes up and you're like, what are you talking about? Like, that is absurd. Like, no, that's not even real. And then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, right. Reality check. But when you don't have that, a person or the background, the history
Mm-hmm.
to rely on and say, am I getting this all wrong? Like, what's going on here? And so I
Right.
think that's the danger of, one, when in real time we're just saying, you know what, let's look around us, what seems right. And then two, we also don't have mechanisms in our society where the classical criticism, we're not critical of each other's ideas. We don't
Mm-hmm.
provide meaningful feedback and saying, here's an evidence-based reason to look again. And I had this really cool experience. I'm on a couple of teams right now, and today we're the beauty of what we're doing is we're going back and forth and saying, what do you think about this? Like, oh my God, that's brilliant. Like, that would never have crossed my mind. That works perfectly. And we're all working together on these things, but
Mm-hmm.
it works better when one person is working alone. So
Right.
I see that as being an extension here
Mm-hmm.
of what's happening, and that the destruction of literature is a robbing of a society of its ability to hold and preserve the wisdom and learning of the past. And
Mm-hmm.
that is, by the way, to tip our hand, exactly what we're trying to do here and say, we've been warned. Read the books, watch the movies. If you see all entertainment as, or all works of art as entertainment only, then what you've missed out on is they are studies of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And what they do is say, what if, and then describe a what if. And with so many explorations of the what if of human future, we have several that got pieces of it right.
Mm-hmm.
So you should read the science fiction that is around you as a spread of, like the tornado tracker, where it could go lots of different ways. So read the
Yes.
tornado tracker like, none of these are, we don't assume any of these in particular are right, but
Right.
the truth is in there somewhere, and the future is in there somewhere, so that when the future develops into the present, you're not seeing it for the first time.
Mm-hmm. Now, to provide some historical context, Ray Bradbury wrote this in 1953 during the McCarthy era.
Yeah.
And at that time, he definitely did say he was concerned about censorship and the future that it could have on America in that time. But later on in the 60s, according to Wikipedia, it says that he was talking about information and taking it in and dumbing it down and not carrying the essential ideas of it. So I thought that was interesting.
And speaking of censorship, it is therefore ironic that Fahrenheit 451 itself has been banned in a number of different cases, particularly in schools, that said, we shall not have you thinking about whether or not you should be thinking. I guess. I wasn't there. I don't remember the whole reason. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, to speak to as a daughter of a librarian, there is a National Banned Book Week where students are encouraged in schools or anywhere, anyone can read books that are banned and talk about why they think that was that way. So many words. But yeah, as far as language and how this book was written, Ray really loves to repeat himself. But and as I was telling Andrew earlier, funnily enough, I listened to this on audiobook on my cell phone, which Ray Bradbury probably wouldn't have liked. But it was
Did you burn the physical copy of it?
No, I actually sold it at some point to Second and Charles. Anyway,
Smells
mine
like
was
freedom.
Apparently,
that smell good.
Somebody said it's Faber said that books smelled like nutmeg or something.
Smells like freedom to me.
But Tim Robbins read my audiobook edition and he did a good job with the different voices. And there was something else I was going to say, but I don't even remember anymore.
Well, takeaways. What you got?
Don't just digest information, but really process it with someone else who isn't you and maybe isn't from where you're from.
Yeah. A takeaway from me is almost an admiration for our main man who decided before he read about books or read the books, he decided to try to think for himself. And it was at great personal risk that he did that. So I was talking to my daughter today, and she's 12. She'll be 13 in just a matter of weeks here. So y'all keep me in your prayers. It's going well. But she's beginning to realize and think about the world around her. And so she's asking me why some of these things are. And the conversation I had with her today was along the lines of, you always have to think for yourself. As a Christian, you have to test what people say. The Bible itself says, test every spirit. You have to see if what someone tells you matches up with what the Bible says. And I said, that includes me. That includes people you trust. You should not believe everything anyone tells you. That doesn't mean you go around contradicting people. You have to build a, excuse the expression, matrix of how do I judge what I'm learning against or hearing against what I've learned before? And how do I go back and say that set off a little alarm? I need to examine that claim, that belief a little bit more. So it was really cool to have that conversation with her. But kudos to the people who, and I'll say it, you and I both live in the South. That's not a thing in the South as much as it is other places. The correct way to be in the South is respectful, by which we mean compliant. So, yeah, but he wants it that way. Yeah, but that's what the boss said, as opposed to from the jump, is this right for us to do this? And then proceed from there. But again, that requires one to take risks, like risk, I don't think lives at this point, but certainly careers, even in the society we live in. And this is in no way restricted to this part of the country or this country. So that's kudos to our guy see what I did there?
I do.
Fahrenheit
451.
What do we got on tap for Friday?
Okay, Friday is Gattaca, which I have not seen, but they actually use it in the biology classes where I teach. So
it's a good one.
Gattaca.
So every time I do this, I'm setting myself up for failure when I don't do it again. But here's my show and tell to end the thing. Ray Bradbury short stories. It's a big one. There are a lot of them. Yes. So
and this actually belongs to my husband, but
nice.
I did like Ray.
His collection of short stories to me are fantastic. This particular tome is over 900 pages long, but each story is only about maybe 10 pages. So
what's the story about the house that's automated and they're still doing stuff even though there was like a nuclear bomb? Do you remember that one?
Yeah, but I have to find the titles. It's in here. He's a fantastic novelist, but he's also a really good short story writer. Yeah, and I really enjoy it. Now there are only 2 or maybe 3 authors for whom I'm a really, really big fan of their short story writing, but Ray Bradbury is definitely on that list.
Side note, for me, Flannery O'Connor would be short stories that I appreciate.
Nice.
And she's a woman in the South. I like her. She's great.
Fantastic. All right. So from the bunker where I'm hidden, stay safe out there.
Yes.
I hope you're well. Just a warning to all of you. I'll put this on the Twitters as well. Just fair warning. When this is all over, you're going to need to let me know as soon as you see me coming if you can't handle the hugs, because I'm going to be doing a lot more hugging because life's too short, people. So,
yeah.
But obviously not for a long, long time until we get the all clear from the CDC and the WHO. Is it the WHO or just HWO?
I think I saw it's the WHO. I don't know.
It's a good. Got some big hits out there. They're wonderful. They're the best. All right, y'all. See you on Friday.
Bye.